Imagine living in a world where the threat of annihilation hangs over you like a chilling specter. This was the reality of the Cold War. The name itself, Cold War, is a paradox, an oxymoron if you will. A war that was cold, not hot. A war where the bullets were not of lead but of ideology and influence. A war that may have lacked the roar of cannons but was deafening in its global impact. In the mid-20th century, two superpowers emerged from the ashes of World War II, each commanding vast resources and influence. On one side, the United States, a beacon of capitalism and democracy, and on the other, the Soviet Union, a stronghold of communism and state control. These two nations, with their starkly different ideologies, began a tenuous dance on the knife edge of diplomacy and conflict. The term Cold War refers to this period of geopolitical tension, a period that spanned over 4 decades from the late 40s to the early 90s. It was a war fought on many fronts, from the political arenas of the United Nations to the race for space, from the nuclear arms race to proxy wars in far-flung corners of the globe. The Cold War was a battle of minds as much as it was a battle of might. It was a war of espionage and subterfuge, of propaganda and perception. It was a race not just for territory, but for the hearts and minds of people around the world. Yet for all its global reach, the Cold War was a war of shadows. It was a war where the biggest battles were fought in secret, in the corridors of power and the clandestine corners of intelligence agencies. The world watched and waited, teetering on the edge of a nuclear abyss as two giants locked in an ideological standoff. The Cold War, a battle not fought with bullets and bombs, but with words, ideologies, and a race for global influence. This was the unseen war, an epoch that shaped the world as we know it today. The seeds of this unseen war were sown in the ashes of World War II. As the smoke cleared and the dust settled, the world found itself divided. The victorious powers carved up the globe, drawing lines in the sand that would define international politics for decades to come. In the heart of Europe, the city of Berlin was divided into 4 zones of occupation. The West was controlled by the United States, Britain, and France, while the East fell under Soviet influence. This division was not just physical but ideological as well. The West championed the principles of democracy and free markets, while the East upheld the tenets of communism. The Iron Curtain, a symbolic boundary representing the ideological divide, was firmly established. It was a line that separated 2 worlds, 2 ways of life, and 2 visions for the future. And thus, the stage was set for a conflict unlike any the world had seen before. As the decades rolled by, the tensions only escalated, bringing the world to the brink of destruction. Let's take a step back into the heart of the Cold War, where the world was perched on the precipice of a global crisis. The Korean War, an early manifestation of these tensions, erupted in 1950. It was a battle of ideologies, pitting the North's communism against the South's democracy. The war was a brutal conflict that lasted 3 years, a somber testament to the Cold War's destructive potential. But the tensions didn't stop there. In 1962, the world held its collective breath during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a deadly standoff, each on the verge of launching nuclear weapons. For 13 nail-biting days, humanity teetered on the edge of nuclear annihilation. It was a chilling reminder of the destructive power both nations wielded. In the midst of this political turmoil, a unique competition emerged: the space race. The United States and the Soviet Union vied for supremacy beyond Earth's atmosphere. This rivalry led to incredible advancements in technology and space exploration, but it was fueled by the same Cold War tensions that threatened global peace. Lastly, we turn our attention to the Vietnam War. From 1955 to 1975, this protracted conflict was yet another battleground for the ideological war between communism and democracy. The war took a heavy toll, both in terms of human lives and the political stability of the region. Each of these events, from the Korean War to the Cuban Missile Crisis, the space race, and the Vietnam War, were chapters in the overarching narrative of the Cold War. They were powerful demonstrations of the lengths nations would go to in order to assert their ideologies. Each event a stark reminder of the razor-thin line between peace and global catastrophe. But even the coldest winters eventually give way to spring. a profound truth and one that found its echo in the chilling era of the Cold War. As we delve deeper into the history of this epoch, we discover that the thawing of the Cold War was not an overnight phenomenon, it was a gradual process, a subtle shift in the political climate that eventually led to the dissolution of this frosty standoff. At the helm of this transformation was a man named Mikhail Gorbachev. As the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, he introduced radical reforms in the late 1980s. His policies of glasnost, meaning openness, and perestroika, meaning restructuring, aimed to revitalize the stagnating Soviet Union by promoting transparency and economic reform. Gorbachev's policies, however, had far-reaching implications. His advocacy for openness led to a surge in public discourse and criticism of the Soviet regime. It was as if the floodgates had been opened and decades of pent-up frustrations were being aired. In the midst of this political revolution, the world watched in awe as the Berlin Wall, that concrete symbol of division and conflict, was torn down in 1989. It was a momentous event, signifying the collapse of the Iron Curtain and the beginning of the end for the Cold War. Yet the final nail in the coffin was the dissolution of the Soviet Union itself. In 1991, the once mighty superpower was dissolved into 15 independent countries. The monolith had crumbled, and with it, the Cold War had effectively ended. In retrospect, the thawing of the Cold War did not come about through grand battles or cataclysmic events. Instead, it was a series of subtle shifts, of policies and reforms, of walls being torn down and regimes collapsing. It was, in essence, a quiet revolution. The Cold War had ended not with a bang, but with a whimper that echoed across the world, signaling the end of an era and the dawn of a new one. The Cold War may have thawed, but its echoes continue to reverberate in the annals of history. The Cold War may be over, but its echoes still reverberate around the world. In the aftermath of the Cold War, a new world order emerged, steeped in the ashes of ideological conflicts and nuclear anxieties. The Cold War's legacy is not just a historical artifact, but it is intertwined with our present and shapes our future. The geopolitical landscape was significantly transformed by the Cold War, the division of the world into two distinct power blocks, the Western led by the United States and the Eastern dominated by the Soviet Union, redefined international relations. The end of the Cold War opened up the doors for the rise of other global powers, creating a multipolar world. Yet the consequences of past alliances and conflicts continue to shape modern geopolitics, with tensions often harking back to the Cold War era. The Cold War was also a catalyst for technological advancements. The space race between the United States and the Soviet Union propelled humanity into a new era of space exploration. The Internet, initially a military innovation, has now transformed every aspect of our lives. The technological rivalry, though rooted in military competition, has gifted us breakthroughs that we now take for granted. Culturally too, the Cold War left an indelible mark. The period saw an explosion of creativity as artists, writers, and filmmakers grappled with the societal and existential threats posed by the conflict. The Cold War themes of surveillance, paranoia, and ideological conflict continue to permeate our art and literature, reflecting the enduring influence of this period. The Cold War's legacy is thus multifaceted, influencing geopolitics, technology, and culture. It serves as a stark reminder of a time when two superpowers armed with nuclear weapons stood on the brink of mutual destruction. It is a chapter in our history that continues to shape our present and future. The Cold War, a chilling testament to the power of ideologies and a reminder of the thin line between peace and destruction. The Cold War, a reminder of our past, a lesson for our future. This complex and intriguing period in our history, spanning from the immediate aftermath of the Second World War right up to the early 90s, was marked by tension, rivalry, and the constant threat of nuclear warfare. We've journeyed through the dawn of the Cold War, witnessing the birth of a new geopolitical landscape. We've navigated the height of tensions, a time when the world stood on a knife's edge, teetering between peace and annihilation. We've observed the thawing of the Cold War, a period of easing strains and growing hopes for a peaceful resolution. And finally, we've explored the legacy of the Cold War, its profound and lasting impact on the world we live in today. In understanding the Cold War, we gain insight into our past and a perspective for our future. Stay curious, stay informed, and as always, keep learning.